p.m. here in Cairo. I am Ahmed Nader, and now it's time for a comprehensive look at the events taking place here in Egypt and the world with Panorama News. We will be starting straight away with the main headlines from the world of politics. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi delegates the Minister of Defense to lay a wreath of flowers on the unknown soldier tomb on the Martyrs' Day. Strikes kill at least 20 near Daesh stronghold in Syria. And Daesh leader frees Mosul as the Iraqi forces advance. Welcome back. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi delegated the Minister of Defense, Sidqi Subhi, to lay a wreath of flowers on the tomb of the unknown soldier in Nasr City, marking the Martyr and the Veterans Day. Marking the occasion, Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, Ahmad Al-Tayyib, congratulated President al-Sisi, the armed forces personnel and the Egyptian people, saying in a statement that the Martyrs' Day highlights the sacrifices of their martyrs for the freedom and independence of the nation. In the meantime, Mufti of the Republic, Shawqi Allam, said that the people appreciate the efforts exerted by the armed forces to preserve the Egyptian security and stability. Allam reiterated his full support to the police and the army forces in the fight against terrorists. March the 9th commemorated the martyrdom of General Abdul Mun'im Riyad, late Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, who was killed on the front on March the 9th in 1969 during the War of Attrition against Israel. Egypt also commemorated on this day the anniversary of the martyrdom of each soldier who was killed on its land defending its territory. At least 20 civilians, including some children, were killed in suspected coalition airstrikes on the village east of the Daesh terrorist group's de facto capital in Syria. The strikes took place as the terrorists came under mounting pressure by the forces working to seize Raqqa, the Daesh terrorist group's de facto capital. Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim said that the United States risks major damage to the relationship with Turkey if the US includes Kurdish forces in the fight to retake Raqqa. Meanwhile, the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs is hosting a meeting to discuss the progress in setting up a program to gather evidence of war crimes in the Syrian civil war and prepare files for the future prosecutions. The American-led coalition said that the American Marines artillery unit has deployed to Syria in recent days to help the local forces speed up the efforts to defeat the Daesh terrorist group at Raqqa, and the campaign to isolate the city is going very well. Coalition spokesman American Air Force Colonel John Dorian said that the additional American forces would be working with the local partners in Syria, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, and the Syrian Arab Coalition, and would not have a frontline role. Dorian added that the additional deployment comprises a total of 400 American forces. It adds to around 500 American military personnel already in Syria. Daesh terrorist group chief Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is reported to have abandoned Mosul, leaving local commanders behind to lead the battle against the Iraqi forces advancing in the city. The details follow.
Daesh terrorist group chief Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is reported to have abandoned Mosul city, leaving local commanders behind to lead the battle against Iraqi forces advancing in the city. With Iraqi troops making steady progress in their assault to retake Mosul from the terrorists, a U.S. defense official said Baghdadi had fled to avoid being trapped inside. Speaking to reporters in Washington, the official added that Baghdadi had left Mosul before Iraqi forces seized control of the key road at the beginning of this month, isolating the terrorists in the city. It was the latest sign that Daesh is feeling the pressure from twin U.S.-backed offensives that have seen it lose much of the territory it once controlled in Iraq and Syria. On Thursday, Iraqi forces were combing the city center area to defuse bombs in homes, shops, and buildings. The Iraqi military said Wednesday that they had also taken a prison northwest of Mosul, where Daesh reportedly executed hundreds of people and held captured Yazidi women. In recent days, Iraqi forces have retaken a series of neighborhoods in western Mosul, as well as provincial government headquarters and a museum where Daesh terrorists filmed themselves destroying priceless artifacts. Last October, Iraq launched the offensive to retake Mosul, which involves tens of thousands of soldiers, police, and allied militia forces. After recapturing its eastern side, the forces set their sights on the city's smaller but more densely populated west.
Amnesty International accused the Arab coalition battling the rebels in Yemen of using banned munitions in the raids on the residential areas. It said in a statement that the munitions were fired in an attack on 3 residential districts and agricultural land in Sada province of northern Yemen, a stronghold of the Shiite Houthi rebels. The Amnesty said that the 2 people were wounded in the attack, which has also reported that the coalition used cluster munitions in 2015 and in 2016. Amnesty called for Brazil to join the Convention on the Cluster Munitions and for Saudi Arabia and the coalition members to stop using the cluster munition. The Israeli army said on Thursday that Israel had arrested a Palestinian allegedly planning attacks for the Lebanese group Hezbollah. The army claimed that Yusuf Suwailim from the occupied West Bank had been contacted by Hezbollah on social media and instructed to form what it termed as a terror cell. It also claimed that his minders had instructed him to gather information regarding the Israeli military bases, security checkpoints, and passages. Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj held meetings in Brussels with the top European Union officials. Al-Sarraj, who heads the Libyan internationally recognized government of national accord, met the European Council President Donald Tusk and the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini. Tusk said on Friday's European Union summit will take a big step in closing off the illegal migration route from Libya across the central Mediterranean. He cast the meeting as a humanitarian action to save lives of 4 people with no chance to stay in Europe. The European Union currently provides more than 100 million euros or 108 million American dollars to Libya, aimed at helping it transition to democracy. Meanwhile, in neighboring Algeria, the Prime Minister said that the Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who is suffering stroke since 2013, is doing very well. Speculation has mounted about the veteran president's health since he suffered a bout of bronchitis in February, forcing the German Chancellor Angela Merkel to cancel a scheduled visit to Algiers at the last minute. 80-year-old Bouteflika has been in power since 1999 and was elected to a 4th term in 2014, but attended his inauguration in a wheelchair and was barely able to deliver more than a few paragraphs of his speech and mumble through the oath of office. A Moroccan appeals court sentenced the Frenchman to 4 years in prison after he was convicted of financially supporting a terror cell, a case that has alarmed the rights groups. The 36-year-old engineer was detained in 2016 in the resort of Essaouira on the Moroccan Atlantic coast. He was initially given 6 years in jail, but the sentence was reduced on appeal by a court in Sale near Rabat on Wednesday evening. The international rights groups in November voiced concern about the case and what they call the convictions based on the tainted confessions in Morocco. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that Germany wants to patch up the ties with Turkey, but without compromising its democratic principles or accepting Nazi jibes from the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The details follow.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel reiterated on Thursday that her country wants to mend sore ties with Turkey. Speaking to Parliament, Merkel vowed to work for German-Turkish relations on the basis of values and in all clarity, stressing that this included the freedoms of speech, the press and assembly. The German Chancellor vowed that her government would do everything in its power to work for the release of journalist Deniz Yücel, who is being held on terrorist propaganda charges. German and Turkish politicians have feuded for the past week after local German authorities cancelled several campaign events by Turkish ministers in support of an April referendum on creating an executive presidency in Turkey. Although Berlin has insisted that local authorities cancel the rallies so far for logistical reasons, Turkish officials have repeatedly hit back, with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan angrily comparing such action to Nazi practices. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said that about 30 rallies were planned and that Ankara had already informed German authorities of them all. He said that Turkey was not calling the current German administration Nazi, but that the recent bans unavoidably remind Ankara the practices during that Nazi period. Berlin has emerged as a strident critic of Ankara's vast crackdown on the wake of a failed attempt against the regime, which has seen more than 100,000 people arrested, suspended from their jobs, or sacked for alleged links to the plotters or Kurdish fighters. Ankara has in turn accused Berlin of harboring terrorists and failing to respond to requests to hand over suspects from the coup, as well as Kurdish militants who it believes are members of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK group.
Prosecutors in Brussels said that a 24-year-old Belgian woman had been charged with terrorism offences on suspicion that she helped people plotting an attack in Europe. In a statement, the Federal Prosecutor's Office said that the woman had been arrested during a raid on a house in western Belgium, which took place between Tuesday and Wednesday. According to the statement, the investigation was completely independent of the probes into the 2015 attacks in Paris and the 2016 bombings in Brussels. Polish Prime Minister Beata Szydło went into a Brussels summit vote saying that the European Union leaders cannot reappoint Donald Tusk as President of the European Union without Poland's agreement. Szydło stressed that the member states should remember that the bloc is supposed to be built on consensus and that they ignored the principle at their peril. The summit was meant to emphasize a newfound unity as the European Union charts a fresh course without Britain. But the Polish government appeared bent on hijacking the proceedings by threatening to block the re-election of Tusk, a former Polish prime minister whom Warsaw accuses of meddling in its domestic politics. A new poll showed centrist candidate Emmanuel Macron for the first time beating the far-right Marine Le Pen in the initial round of French presidential elections next month. The details follow.
French centrist Emmanuel Macron saw his position as favorite to win the country's presidential election boosted on Thursday in two polls, with one showing him ahead of far-right leader Marine Le Pen in the first round of the two-stage contest. A monthly survey put Le Pen well ahead in the April 23rd first round, though Macron was seen easily beating her in a May 7th runoff. However, a Harris Interactive poll showed Macron winning the first round with 26% of votes, with Le Pen taking second place on 25%, putting him up to trounce her in the runoff with a score of 65%. However, a Harris Interactive poll showed Macron winning the first round with 26% of votes. It was the second poll in the space of a week that put the 39-year-old ahead of Le Pen in the opening round, a signal that the centrist former economy minister may be consolidating his position 45 days from the first stage of the contest. The polls coincided with a release of a research note from Credit Suisse Bank that said the risk of a win for Le Pen, who wants to restore the French franc currency, was exaggerated. The race remains difficult to call, however, after many surprises, including socialist François Hollande's decision not to seek a second term and wins in primaries for contenders the pollsters had ruled out. Additionally, financial scandals have engulfed Le Pen and Fillon. After a series of resignations, Fillon's team announced senior appointments on Thursday to try to shore up his campaign, including former Finance Minister François Barouin in the special role of unifying the increasingly fragmented Republican Party.
Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon told the BBC that Scotland would hold an independence referendum in the autumn of 2018, just months before Britain is due to leave the European Union, and the second poll in a month suggested rising support for the secession. The prospect for an independence vote in Scotland that could rip apart the United Kingdom just months before the European Union exit adds to the complexity of negotiations on the British departure from the European Union. The Scottish threat of a second independence vote in 4 years also raises the pressure on English Prime Minister Theresa May as she prepares to trigger the formal exit negotiations with the other 27 members of the European Union over the UK's divorce terms. Meanwhile, in Romania, the president said that he will ask the judges to declare unconstitutional an emergency government decree that dilutes what qualifies as corruption after hundreds of thousands of people protested the measure. The government passed an emergency ordinance early on Wednesday to decriminalize the cases of official misconduct if the funds involved are less than 200,000 lei. Huge protests erupted in the capital and spread to the cities around Romania in the past 2 evenings. The Kremlin rejected the American claims of the Russian violations of a nuclear arms treaty, saying it has respected the pact and will continue to do so. General Paul Selva, vice chairman of the American Joint Chiefs of Staff, accused Russia of deploying a cruise missile in violation of the spirit and the intent of the 1987 Nuclear Forces Treaty. He said that the Moscow intention is to threaten the American facilities in Europe and the NATO alliance. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded that they disagree with and reject any such accusations. A senior American administration official said that the American Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will host a meeting in Washington this month to discuss the next moves by the coalition fighting Daesh. And the Senate Foreign Relations Committee has approved the President Donald Trump's pick for the American ambassador to Israel. Members of the Republican-led panel voted 12-9 to recommend the full Senate consider David Friedman's nomination. Meanwhile, the House Republicans scored the triumph in the effort to scuttle former President Barack Obama's health care overhaul, but it masked the deeper problems as hospitals, doctors and consumer groups mounted the opposition to the GOP health care drive. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange said that his group will work with technology companies to help defend them against the Central Intelligence Agency's hacking tools. The details follow.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Thursday that WikiLeaks' dumb U.S. intelligence had lighted the CIA reported capability to imitate an electronic trace. Lavrov said while Russia has been accused of leaving its fingerprints after hacks on the U.S., documents released by WikiLeaks showed that CIA could get access to such fingerprints. The Russian top diplomat noted that Moscow needs to take the CIA hacking capabilities into account. Meanwhile, China expressed concern over a revelation in a trove of data released by WikiLeaks. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman expressed Beijing concern about the reports. Revelations about the CIA use of hacking tools by anti-group WikiLeaks show that the risk of massive surveillance and boost the case for international regulation. He said the case highlighted the growing security risk. The official reiterated that surveillance needs to be supervised.
Pakistan shut its border with Afghanistan after opening it for 2 days, saying that the measure was necessary to save the Pakistanis from attacks by the militant groups operating inside Afghanistan. A spokesman for the Pakistani Foreign Ministry told the reporters that Islamabad had been forced to close the border due to a terrorist threat by those groups which were trying to carry out attacks in Pakistan. Pakistan shut the two main border crossings with Afghanistan after a two-day opening that enabled more than 35,000 people to cross the border. The United Nations World Food Programme said that the two Malaysian employees have been permitted to leave North Korea as Kuala Lumpur negotiates for 9 more citizens trapped by the diplomatic row over the murder of Kim Jong-nam. The United Nations agency said that the staff members were international civil servants and did not represent the national government. It added that the pair who worked on the World Food Programme programs in North Korea had arrived in Beijing. Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak said that Kuala Lumpur would negotiate to ensure that the remaining 9 nationals would be allowed to leave. And turning to the wildfires scorching hundreds of square miles of Kansas, Colorado, Texas and Oklahoma have been blamed in at least 6 deaths. Thousands of people have been displaced by the flames. A wildfire in Kansas has consumed an estimated 861 square miles of land, eclipsing last year's record for the biggest single blaze in the state's history. Kansas Division of Emergency Management spokeswoman said that the estimated 625 square mile is about 85% of the country's total land. This brings us to the end of the political segment of Panorama News. Now with the main headlines from the world of business and economy with Dina Hussein. Dina.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. And coming up will be the headlines in a moment, so stay with us. Egypt's stock market indices gained £8 billion. Higher yields drive dollar to 3-week high versus yen. The ECB keeps policy unchanged. Welcome back. Prime Minister Sharif Ismail met with Richard Eccles. We're going to go to a short break and we'll come back to you, so stay with us. Welcome back. We apologize for this technical mistake, and we resume the business news. Prime Minister Sharif Ismail met with Richard Dectus, the coordinator of the UN and representative of the UN Development Program, who had taken over his job in Cairo. The Prime Minister and Dectus discussed the latest economic and political developments in Egypt during the last period. The Premier reviewed efforts exerted by the state in order to increase investments. Ismail referred to current challenges facing Egypt as well as the Middle East countries. For his part, the UN official hailed experts Egypt's serious efforts to push forward the ailing economy and said he would transfer his positive image to the UN. He stressed the significance of continued coordination between the two sides to achieve developments in various domains. The meeting was attended by Minister of Investment and International Cooperation, Sahar Nasr. France's ambassador to Egypt reiterated on Thursday that investors have a big confidence in the Egyptian economy. The ambassador said the number of French firms in Egypt had reached 150 in different sectors. He noted that the French government is always keen on showing the merits of investments in Egyptian markets. The ambassador hailed government in solving all obstacles facing investors, especially the French investors. And Egypt's stock market rebounded on Thursday, gaining £8 billion after being bolstered by huge purchasing operations by Arab and foreign investors. The main EGX 30 added 12,750 points to close at 0.93%. The small and medium EGX 70 added 1.8% to close at 518.64 points. The more expanded EGX 100 soared 0.85% to reach 1,234.96 points. The overall transactions and dealings with session reached £1.3 billion. The European Central Bank kept monetary policy firmly on hold on Thursday as it cast a nervous eye towards high-risk elections in France and Netherlands during a surge in popular sentiment that threatens to derail recovery. The details in the following report.
La Banque centrale européenne a annoncé jeudi un net relèvement de sa prévision d'inflation pour 2017, après une poussée des prix en début d'année en zone euro, et s'est montrée un peu plus confiante pour la croissance de la région. Pour 2018, elle a aussi rehaussé son pronostic, mais plus légèrement.
The bank thinks the balance of risking facing the 19-country Eurozone has shifted away. Though economic growth and inflation are picking up, the ECB resisted growing calls to pave the way for policy tightening. For once, the outlook is improving. Economic sentiment is at 6-year high. Trade is rebounding. Even inflation, the ECB key objective, has rebounded. The central bank will announce its policy decisions. The rebound in inflation has fueled calls in Germany, the 90-member council bloc biggest economy. But at best, the central bank may increase some economic forecast for inflation. It may also drop its reference to downside economic risk.
We'll have to leave it here with the business news. Now over to the sports news and my